Well, welcome again to All Saints Church in East Clevedon as we reflect together on the readings for Trinity 14, the 13th of September. There are two readings I'd like to draw to your attention. First of all, from Genesis chapter 50, verses 15 to 21. This is the account of Joseph as he forgives his brothers right at the end of the Joseph story. And then the Gospel, Matthew 18, verses 21 to 35, the well-known parable of the unforgiving servant. I want to say just a few words about forgiveness. Well, everyone makes mistakes. All of us, from time to time, do or say things which we regret. In the confession we say each week as part of our liturgy, we pray for forgiveness for errors we have made through ignorance, weakness, through our own deliberate fault. But notice it's we and not just I. As we live our lives, as the story of our life unfolds, so we will gather experience of forgiveness, either of being forgiven by others or of offering forgiveness ourselves for what others have done to us. You won't need me, therefore, to teach you about it. Life will have taught you. And it may well be, of course, that it's in this area of forgiveness, within the context of fault, blame, error, misjudgment, regret, hurt, damage and bitterness, that some of your most painful memories lie. Therefore, I shall tread carefully, for I tread not just on your dreams, but on your bruises too. To forgive is firstly to forbear from requiring a just punishment for wrong. Secondly, it's a gesture toward righting a damaged relationship. But that's where the certainty and the definitions end, really. As the circumstances surrounding a wrong become more complex and more profound, as the consequences of a wrong become more hurtful, so the nature of forgiveness becomes more complex and profound in turn. Forgiveness is sometimes a work not just of a moment, but of a lifetime. And although many relationships can be restored positively, sometimes they inevitably change permanently, and rightly so. Forgiveness requires judgment as well as grace. So can I tell you two stories to illustrate two rather different kinds of forgiveness? These may be nowhere near any experience you've had, but I hope at least they illustrate something. Firstly, the experience of a church warden in a parish many miles from here and in a different part of the country. He came from a mining background in the Midlands and was the elder of two brothers. Being academically able, he went to the local grammar school and thereafter to university to read architecture. He was the first in his family to attend university, and design and art were far from his family's normal experience. He became an Anglican Christian, again new for his family, and became church warden of his local parish church. His brother followed rather more closely in his father's footsteps. Having left school at 16, he undertook an engineering apprenticeship and worked in a local car factory, a good, skillful, honest, and reasonably well-paid and well-rewarded job. In later years, his mother developed dementia, and as a loving and dutiful son, helped the family fully, even though by this time he lived far away. He offered emotional, practical, and spiritual support, and the family seemed genuinely grateful and close. And so life continued. His mother sadly died some years later, and then his father 5 years or so after her. However sad this was, there was nothing to indicate what was about to be disclosed, which was that his father had left the family home and all its contents, together with the money which he had, to his brother. Without explanation, his father had left just £25 to him. He was stunned and shocked to the core. It wasn't the money exactly It was what was being said. What did this mean? Did his family hate him? Were they resentful? Did they not understand him? Had he done something wrong? Was there manipulation by the brother? To this day, he doesn't really know. He's just left thinking whether he can forgive the hurt and whether the love shared in the family was a sham. It's not unlike the Joseph story. My second story is very different. On the 14th of November 1940, Coventry suffered catastrophic damage in the Blitz and would be bombed many times subsequently. My father and his family lived in Coventry at the time. Although they all survived, my father's school, like many others, was destroyed and his formal education pretty much came to an end. My grandfather was buried under rubble, but was rescued. The cinema in the town was showing the film Gone with the Wind, and the advertising poster survived. 4,300 homes were destroyed, 2/3 of the city destroyed or damaged, 1/3 of its factories were destroyed, and almost 600 people killed and 1,000 injured. Among the damage was the ruined cathedral church. When I lived in Leicester and work brought me to Coventry, I would sometimes have the time to sit in the new cathedral and in the ruins of the old which have been preserved. And there, in the ruins, in the shell of the cathedral with no roof and no windows, is the altar. Above it are simply the words, Father, forgive. It reminds me of the parables about forgiveness that Jesus taught. You see, the Coventry altar doesn't say, Father, forgive them, nor indeed, Father, forgive us, but simply, Father, forgive. It touches upon perhaps the most essential ingredient of a Christian understanding of grace and forgiveness, which is that all humanity is broken to an extent. All humanity is fallible. And although there are certainly levels and depths of wrong, and many individual, severe, and even shocking examples of human evil, nonetheless, we are called upon to recognise our own fallibility as well as that of others. Father, forgive, as Christ said on his cross. To ignore this, however tempting it is to be spiritually blinded. Individuals, families, and communities need forgiveness. Individuals because we make mistakes and we need the time and the grace to be able to learn from them and to live freely as far as we can. Families because we need to learn that love tolerates and bears all things and strives to keep no permanent record of wrongs. And communities because living in hate for generations scars community and institutionally distorts healthy relationships and partnerships, which ultimately impoverishes everyone and sets a context for further conflict. But I suspect that not everything can be forgiven in this life, and might even be your experience. You may not even be able to forgive yourself. Sometimes the damage is just too severe. Frequently, the circumstances mitigate it, because for a relationship to be healed must take at least two people who want it, and that isn't always the case. But the Christian faith calls us to find the grace to desire it, both to offer and receive forgiveness. For it teaches that we too are a forgiven people. The Joseph story in Genesis is a story retelling Israel's history, which sought to understand what happened in Egypt and why so many Israelites flourished under those circumstances of servitude and how it emerged into a position of power. In its way, it is a form of national self-forgiveness. The parable of the unforgiving servant makes the point that we're all in it together. Measured against the holiness of God, none of us compares particularly well. But that in spite of this, grace is offered to us all. Ultimately, however necessary and needful forgiveness is, it is always an act of grace, an act reflecting the grace and forgiveness of God.